It's that special time of year again. The Game Awards for 2023 are finally here. Something that I wanted to do today was go through and vote on every single one of the categories because there's a lot of good games for 2023 and I wanted to go through them with you guys and show you what my personal votes are for the Game Awards. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So I talked about in my best video games of 2023 video that I really do think that Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 and Tears of the Kingdom are going to be the three pillars of the Game Awards, and that those are going to be the three real contenders for Game of the Year. Obviously, you had other choices like Alan Wake 2, and you had Resident Evil 4 and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Those were obviously very good games, but I think for the sheer amount of players that bought Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man, and Tears of the Kingdom, I think those games had such an impact when they were released that I think those are going to be the three strongest contenders for the Game of the Year category. For me personally, I loved Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is a game unlike any other I've seen since the likes of The Witcher 3. It was an open world RPG that had such rich lore, and the character writing was just phenomenal in that. That being said, Spider-Man 2 is probably going to be what I'm going to vote for because I'm a sucker for Spider-Man. I love anything that's comic book related. Ultimately, he's one of my favorite characters of all time, so I'm obviously biased towards that category, and I think the story that they built on from the 2018 game was just amazing. Venom and Kraven as villains were just amazing, and there's absolutely no negative notes I have to say about those two performances. As far as Resident Evil 4 goes, Jared's probably going to be really mad at me for skipping over that, but sorry, I gotta go with Marvel's Spider-Man 2. For best game direction, I truly believe that Baldur's Gate 3 deserves this one, because although Marvel's Spider-Man 2 has a great creative team and they have one of the best creative directors in the industry in Brian Intihar, I truly think that Baldur's Gate 3 is a game that shouldn't have worked on paper and in practice, but because it has such a devoted team to it in Larian Studios, I really do think that it surprised almost every single developer and it upset the status quo of the gaming industry at large. So I really do think that Baldur's Gate 3 deserves this above all the others. That's not to say that the rest don't deserve this award, but I do think that in this category, Baldur's Gate 3 stands out. For best story, this is going to be a really hard one for me as I'm a fan of the story of all of these games. For me, I think the story is ultimately between Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, and Spider-Man 2. And Phantom Liberty was such a great expansion on the Cyberpunk 2077 story, and the additional lore that they added to the game, and the new characters that we had in Idris Elba, and the new plot of the spy thriller type setting that we got to visit Dogtown in, I thought was just a perfect choice for what to add to that game. And to be fair, Spider-Man 2, I think the story is the best part of it. I think that's the standout of it. It really does feel like I'm just reading another Spider-Man comic, but instead, this time I get to be Spider-Man. I get to play as Spider-Man. Technically, two Spider-Man this time around. So, again, you guys are probably going to yell at me, but I'm biased. We're going to go Spidey again. It's going to be a common theme that a lot of the games in categories are deserving of the award. I have, obviously, my own biases. You probably do too for what you want for every game to win. And for best art direction, I really do think Hi-Fi Rush is the best choice for this. For the anime/graphic novel art style that Tango Gameworks chose for Hi-Fi Rush, I think is such a perfect fit for that game. And it stands out amongst the crowd in such a particular way. I just got to give my vote for this to Hi-Fi Rush. Best score in music, I gotta be honest, I'm a little disappointed not to see Spider-Man on this list, but, you know, obviously you can't have that game on every list. So for best score in music, I think I'm gonna go with Baldur's Gate 3 because the music of that game was just amazing, and I can remember feeling so immersed because of the soundtrack of the game in whatever cutscene I was in, or whatever combat encounter I was doing, or even just like being a bard class character, just fiddling around on my lute, and the ability to just pull it out whenever and to just do that. I know that's technically game mechanics, but the ability to just play music whenever you wanted was just such a cool feature in the game. So I'm going to give this to Baldur's Gate 3. For best audio design, again, this is a super tough one because Dead Space had such a great audio engine this time around, and the way that EA and EA Motive remastered the audio from the original game, I didn't think that the original Dead Space could make me even more scared when playing it, but they somehow did that, and in a large part due to the audio engine that they had. That being said, Spider-Man 2's audio design is also pretty impressive, and Resident Evil 4 and Alan Wake 2's as well. These are all great games with great audio design, but I think ultimately for me, I'm going to go Dead Space on this one. Oh no, this is the one I was dreading. Jeff Keighley. You're really making me choose between these people. There isn't a single person on this list that I think doesn't deserve this award. award. Neil Newborn as Astarion was phenomenal. He was so hilarious in the game. Cameron Monaghan as Cal Kestis in Star Wars Jedi Survivor, complete standout. Ben Starr from Final Fantasy 16 I thought was amazing too. Melanie LeBird from Alan Wake 2, she was charming. She actually kept me enthralled in the story more because she had such a convincing performance. Ultimately, for me, I think the two characters, surprise, surprise, is between Cyberpunk and Spider-Man again. Idris Elba gave such a good performance as Solomon Reed in Cyberpunk 2077, and he played such a convincing character, but you know what I'm going to say. There's no way I'm not going to give this award to Spidey. I got to go with Bully Lowenthal after all. For innovation and accessibility, I do think I'm going to give this to Marvel Spider-Man 2 again, just because from what I've seen, they did try to make the game as accessible to people who were more physically restricted in playing games, and the representation we had for people that were hard of hearing, especially since there's a deaf character in the game. I think that's important representation as well. So I think I'm going to give this one to Marvel Spider-Man 2. Games for Impact, I honestly think I'm going to give this to Goodbye Volcano High. Not only is it a great indie game, but I think it also has some really strong messaging in it, so I think I'm going to go with that. For the best ongoing game, I think I'm going to give this to Cyberpunk 2077, technically, because even though it's a single-player release, the development team behind it has worked so hard to achieve the original vision that they set out for when the game originally launched in 2020. So I think because of the hard work that they put in to course correct and to make up for the mistakes they made, I think that they are deserving of this award. For best community support, I think I'm going to give this to Baldur's Gate 3. Honestly, the community for this game is so supportive, and every time that I was like, how do I get this specific outcome for this specific quest? I hopped on Reddit, and everyone there was so helpful, and same thing with the Steam community too. Like, the community behind this game is just amazing, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. The same can be true for a lot of these games, especially Cyberpunk 2077, but I think Baldur's Gate 3 was particularly a good community to be a part of. So let's do that. For best indie game, Dave the Diver was a big one for everybody, but honestly, I think Dredge was probably my indie game of the year out of the ones on this list, so I think that's what I'm going to go with. Best debut indie game, I don't care what anybody else says on this list. It's Pizza Tower all the way. I know I just said Dredge, but hey, we're going best debut indie game here. For best mobile game, I'm not the biggest mobile player kind of guy. I play like one or two mobile games here and there. I think from what I've seen of the footage from the games that are on this list, I think Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis would be the most deserving of this game. So that's the game I'm going to choose here. For best VR AR game, I think I'm going to go with Horizon Call of the Mountain because Gran Turismo 7 and Resident Evil Village, those are two games that aren't even made fully for VR. They just have VR compatible modes. And I think Horizon Call of the Mountain is a big example of a AAA VR experience. And we really don't have a lot of those because a lot of companies don't really want to invest further in VR or VR development. So I think it's important to highlight the standout of Horizon Call of the Mountain. So that's what I'm going to go vote for this. For best action game, honestly, this was really hard to decide for me. It came down to Hi-Fi Rush and Ghost Runner 2, and I was such a big fan of the original Ghost Runner. And Ghost Runner 2 is just the first one, but more. It improves on the first one in every way, and honestly, I'm a big fan of the genre. I'm a big fan of hack and slash. I'm a big fan of high-speed combat, so I think ultimately I'm going to go with Ghost Runner 2. For best action adventure, you probably know what I'm going to say. Spider-Man 2 all the way. For best RPG, I made a video earlier that Starfield was not going to be game of the year, and honestly, it's not even the best RPG on this list. I know it's game of the year for a lot of people out there, so no hate to anybody who likes this game. I enjoy it a lot too, but I think best RPG clearly should go to Baldur's Gate 3, and sorry, Starfield fans, it's not even close. I unironically think that Nickelodeon's All-Star Brawl 2 is really deserving of this award, but between all the options on this list, I think I'm going to give it to Street Fighter 6 because I was leaning towards Mortal Kombat 1, but it did have a pretty bad launch on the Switch, which I think was unacceptable. So I think I got to give it to Street Fighter 6 in the end. For best family game, I think the clear choice for me would be Super Mario Bros. Wonder, because even though that the rest of these games are pretty fun, they're pretty cool casual games that you could play with the kids or play with your family. I think Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a standout because it's the first super big budget Mario game since Mario Odyssey, I believe. So that's why I think I'm going to go with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. For best strategy game, honestly, a few of these games have gotten mixed reviews. Like City Skylines 2 is really unoptimized on PC right now. Company of Heroes 3 has gotten really mixed reviews amongst players. Advanced Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp was really fun. Fire Emblem Engage is probably one of the better Fire Emblem games we've had in the more recent years. But I think because it's been such a long time since the last Pikmin game, and because it's just another great Pikmin experience, I gotta go with Pikmin 4. For best racing game, honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of the Crew franchise. I really don't care for the F1 games. I'm not the hugest fan of them, or the EA Sports FC games. Forza Motorsport was really cool, but it was a bit too sim racing for me. I like my games a little more on the fun arcadey side. I think that's why I'm going to go with Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 for this. For best multiplayer, I think the clear choice for me is Baldur's Gate 3, because I remember, even though I didn't play through the whole game with him, playing with Jared through the campaign of Baldur's Gate 3 was such a fun time. We got into such cool misadventures, and we had great encounters because there were two of us there. So I think it's a great experience to have with your friends. If your friends play on PC or you have a PS5, you should definitely try Baldur's Gate 3 with a friend, because it's a great co-op multiplayer experience. For best adaptation, I think clearly the winner here should be The Last of Us. Even though the Super Mario Bros. Movie was great, Twisted Metal, honestly, I don't think deserves this award. Gran Turismo, I mean, like, do we really need a Gran Turismo movie? Like, I'm sorry if there's any Gran Turismo fans out there. Tell me if you really wanted a Gran Turismo movie. Castlevania Nocturne was another great show on Netflix, but I think the standout is The Last of Us, because I think it's a great adaptation for specifically a live action video game show. Honestly, The Last of Us 1 is one of my favorite games, and I think the adaptation that they did here was so great. So that's why I'm going to vote The Last of Us. For most anticipated game, honestly, I thought there would be very different games on this list, but out of the ones available here, I think my personal most anticipated is Hades 2. Like a Dragon games, there's just been so much of them coming out, and Tekken 8, like, we have a slew of fighting games available right now. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like, it is going to be a great game that I expect to be phenomenal, but for me, Hades 2 all the way. There was Content Creator of the Year and a bunch of esports categories that I didn't show you my votes on as well, but the truth is I just don't follow content creators that much, and I don't really follow esports that much. So I really don't think my votes will be meaningful there. But I'll still vote for who I think is the best one, even though I don't know much about them. The Game Awards is premiering on December 7th this year, so be sure to tune into that. I'll be sure to give you guys a recap and the biggest news that we see there, as well as the winners of the awards that you saw here today. That's pretty much it for this video, guys. If you like the content and want to see more, please like and subscribe. We publish brand new content every day, so there's always something new for you to watch. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.